So we had three breakout questions on the table. The first being, what is the thesis of the text? The second being, what is your favorite wisdom teaching? And then finally, what does the teaching say about the values of the society that produced the teachings? Who would like to share?
I think it's kind of like I think it's kind of like more like having like human decency, like don't be like an awful person, be good instead of like bring positivity instead of negativity to the world.
So that's you're saying that's the thesis of the text.
Yeah.
Okay, bet. Anyone else want to add on to that thesis or further complicate the thesis? So you get. I could call on people. You get it. Go
In
ahead.
my
Go ahead.
opinion, that the thesis was photo. Oh, yes, for this text was that Ptahhotep was chosen as a wisdom of his people.
Is chosen as advisor of the people. Is that what you're saying? Who else? Maybe, is that what you're saying, Kyle?
God chose Ptahhotep how to. Uh,
You're breaking up, but I think I got what you're saying. We'll get one more about the thesis, then we'll move on to the second part, the favorite wisdom teaching. So one more on your thoughts on what the thesis was of the text.
I thought that the thesis was referring to the theorem, the father of the son, that talks about like his wisdom and him passing it on to his son as a way of explaining like this is how life goes. You have your own choices, you make your own choices, and your choices impact who you are as a person.
Okay.
That was it.
Thank you, Nina. So what were some of your all's favorite wisdom teachings? So out of the 37 some odd teachings, which ones were your favorites, or which ones stood out to you most?
The act of not boasting.
Yeah, it's a lot of emphasis placed on humility. Good call out, Amanda. Eric?
Oh yeah. Also, mine was number 12, which is kind of similar to what Nina kind of explained. Which is like if you're a wise man, train up a son who will be pleasing to God. And I think that was very important because like training your son or your offspring correctly really does like affect how they will grow up to be as a person. And if you train them in a way that's correct and moral, that will help them become a good person in society.
Thank you. Jaden?
I think my favorite probably was 29. It was talking about how it was just saying how if you're angered at yourself for like your misdeeds, that you should lean on someone um, or lean on God, saying that I feel like because as a person, if you are like troubling or going through something that you feel like you are angered about or you feel like you wish you didn't make that mistake, I feel like leaning on something or leaning on like faith or belief or just someone or having someone by your side it helps like through it. That's why it's a good teaching to know about and like very knowledgeable to have.
Perfect. Thank you, Jaden. Kevin?
I think one of my favorites is number 20, which is do not be greedy in the division of things, which is kind of like don't hold like so much of your like priorities. It's okay to share sometimes. It's okay to be selfless. Like don't like like close yourself off, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Ernesto?
So for this one, I said the fifth one, where it says, if you're a man who leads, a man who controls the affairs of many, then seek the most perfect way of performing your responsibility so that your conduct will be blameless. And I don't know why, but to me at least, I saw it as like if you are able to control many things, such as like controlling the people around you or like the act of wars that I've seen, if you're able to control it and able to cause less chaos, I find that more, I guess to me at least, I find it more better because in a world that I would want to live in is less chaos or less, rowdiness of the thought of war.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I just enjoyed that one very much.
So what I want you all to do is keep Ernesto's comments in the back of your mind, right? Like the desire to avoid chaos, right? Like keep that in the back of your mind. Finally, what does this reading say about the ancient Kemetic society, about the ancient Kemetic people? What does it say about their values based off what you read within the text?
I think there was like an overall emphasis on like the importance of like attentively listening to those who are like your elders or like those who are like a higher power of you. I mean, higher power than you. And so I believe like their society really valued like more like listening and understanding what people are trying to teach you or explain to you rather than just speaking or always just saying whatever you think all the time and understanding what other people are trying to explain to you.
Good call out. Anyone else? What does it say about the values of the Kemetic society that produced it?
I agree with what he said. I believe that they had a lot of empathy and they set things like boundaries and stuff to respect one another, which was really good.
One more and we'll move into my notes.
I think it's like
Okay.
kind of like, oh,
Go
I
ahead,
think it's kind of like have like good morals. Like although you can have your own opinion, make sure to listen to others while like not closing your own, like not like staying focused on your own opinion. You can like open up and listen to others around you.
Good call out. Abigail?
I want to agree with Kevin about the morals. They believe in human decency instead of like disregarding the people that are weak. They respect each other no matter their status.
I like that. This idea of morals and this idea of human decency, right? Especially when you talk about morals. I'm going to ask you to think back to, was it last week or even Monday for that matter, the lecture in the space where I mentioned the first theoretical framework of the semester, right? African American male theory, an unlimited capacity to be what? Moral. And you see that within the text, right? There's a great emphasis placed on the desire for the society as a whole to be a moral society. And I think you all were able to pick up on that pretty astoundingly. So this is the book that I pulled those pages from. It's called The Teachings of Ptahhotep. The subtext is the oldest book in the world, right? So this is quite literally the oldest book in the world. It's a book of wisdom teachings, and a book of Proverbs. What I would like to do is provide you with some context that you were not privy to because I didn't provide the introduction of the text. So I'll read from that a little bit, and then hopefully this will provide some of the context for the information that you've read. And then we'll go a little bit deeper into the lecture from there. So this is about Ptahhotep, right? He says Ptahhotep himself was said to be the eldest legitimate son of an unnamed pharaoh and was 110 years old when he wrote this book. M. Revolt has said that Ptahhotep was in the line to become pharaoh, but that he renounced the throne and politics in favor of the priestly calling. This is consistent with the description of the Kemetic education as providing for a choice of two paths in higher education, one more sacred and one more secular, such as in politics. So we can glean a couple of things from that passage, right? One, Ptahhotep lived to be at least 110 years old, right? We know from this passage also that the ancient Kemetic mystery schools, right, they provided you two avenues of education, one being more of the priestly calling, right, more sacred, as they say within the text, and one being more secular or one being involved with politics, right? So you could either be a politician or you could be a priest, right? This is what the education in Kemet would allow you to do, right? One of the things I want to bring to your attention, again, this is called the oldest book in the world, right? one of the great legends that we have about African history is that it's only a oral tradition, right? It's a history, it's a culture that's steeped in oral traditions, right? Hence the title of the class, right? It's called African Oral Traditions, correct? But what happens is, because of so much emphasis being placed on the oral tradition, we rarely get credit for having written word, right? You can't have a book without the words being written, right? So while there is this vibrant and profoundly brilliant oral culture within Africa, there's also a written culture. The Metu Neter, right? This is what we understand, or what you may call the hieroglyphics, but the original name for the hieroglyphics are the Metu Neter. The Metu Neter is Africa's and the world's oldest recorded writing system. What's important about the Metu Neter is that there is no evidence of a developmental period. This writing system simply appears fully developed, as it must have existed ages before either Kemet or Tasseti came into being. The existence of this writing alone is testimonial to the development of early civilization in the ancient Hapti, and when they say Hapti, that just means Nile Valley, okay? So again, from this, there is no record of a developmental period for the Metu Neter. The Metu Neter is spelled MDW, Netcher, Netcher, Metu Neter. So they cannot find any recordings of it being developed. When it appears on the scene, it appears as a fully constructed written language. Okay. You won't go into that. So to kind of speak to how old it is and why it's the oldest book in the world, right? It says the instructions of Ptahhotep were copied during the Middle Kingdom on papyri that are still preserved. Some Egyptologists believe that because the instructions were attributed to Ptahhotep, and because there was indeed an old kingdom sage by that name, and because Middle Kingdom writers attributed the sayings to that sage, who is said to have served under King Asa of the 5th dynasty, therefore they should accept that attribution, in the absence of compelling evidence to the contrary. Even if it were Middle Kingdom material at an age of the 12th dynasty of approximately 2,000 years BC, it would still be the oldest wisdom literature in the world. Given a 5th dynastic age, we can say that the instructions of Ptahhotep belong to a period approximately 2,500 years before Christ. So these are the things that they're arguing, right? We know that there was a sage by the name of Ptahhotep. He served in the Middle Kingdom, right? Around the 5th dynasty, serving under King Asa, right? And what they're saying is, we haven't found any evidence that contradicts those facts, right? So since we haven't found any evidence that contradicts that, we can believe that it is true. And this would situate the teachings of Ptahhotep to be about 2,500 years before Christ. Right? This is how they argue that it's one of the oldest books in the world. So that is like the precursor. That's some of the context to the text. Let's dive into it though, right? So I believe on page 16, and you may not have the page numbers as it's copied, but in the opening page of the text, we find the thesis, right? And I'm going to argue that it will be on the bottom portion of that second full paragraph, starting with, may your servant, right? And these are the words of Ptahhotep. May your servant be authorized to use the status of that old age affords, right? So we know that he's 110 years old. So in other words, let me use my 110 years of wisdom, right, to teach the hearers as to tell them the words of those who have listened to the ways of our ancestors and of those who have listened to the gods. And may I do this for you so that strife may be banned from among our people and so that the two shores may serve you. Okay, let's break that down. He wants to use his 110 years of wisdom to teach the people who hear, right, who are willing to listen, and tell them the words of the ancestors and the words of those who listen to the gods, right? So I'm going to serve as a conduit. I'm going to serve as an intermediary between those who listen to the ancestors and those who listen to the gods. I'm going to tell that to the multitude of people. I'm going to tell that to our society, right? I want to do this so strife may be banned from our people. Now, somebody tell me, what is strife? What is strife? What does that mean?
Conflict.
Conflict, absolutely. So if he wants to ban strife, right, he wants to create a society that is free of conflict, right? So if we are to apply this analogy to the United States, right, we have the western portion of the United States, we have the eastern portion of the United States, right? You have the West Coast and the East Coast. He wants to eliminate strife so both shores, so the West Coast and the East Coast will serve you. There's not beef, there's not war, there's not antagonism between these two sides, right? So the thesis of the text, the thesis and the reasoning behind these wisdom teachings is to eliminate strife. So everything that you hear within these wisdom teachings is about removing strife from the society. How will he do that, right? He says, and so begins the formulation of the Metu Nefer, right? So we know that the Metu Neter is the written language, or what we would call the hieroglyphics, right? But on the next page, he gives us the Metu Nefer, Medu, M-D-W, Nefer, N-F-R, right? And what is Netu Nefer? Netu Nefer is good speech. Good speech to be spoken by the prince, the count, God's beloved, the eldest son of the Pharaoh, the son of his body, mayor of the city, and the vizier. Ptahhotep instructs the ignorant in the knowledge and in the standards of good speech. It will profit those who hear, it will be a loss to those who transgress. Ptahhotep begins to speak to the Pharaoh's son to prosperity. So think about it, right? If the desire is to eliminate strife, if the desire is to eliminate beef, if the desire is to eliminate bickering, right? He says how we'll do that is by speaking to each other good, by conducting good speech. So when I talk to you, Nina, I'm going to talk to you in a way that uplifts you and makes you feel good about yourself, right? When I talk to you, Adelia, I'm going to talk to you in a way that uplifts you and makes you feel good about yourself, right? That's going to cause us to have these harmonious interactions. Now, think back to last week's lecture or Monday's lecture, and I talked about Ma'at, right? And Ma'at being a goddess with 7 principles: truth, justice, harmony, right? Harmony is one of the principles of Ma'at. To remove strife is to produce harmony. So if I'm going to produce harmony and I'm going to engage in Metu Nefer, good speech, I'm going to speak things to you that promote harmony. Does that make sense? So listen to who should be speaking good speech. The prince, the count, God's beloved, the eldest son of the Pharaoh, the son of his body, the mayor of the city, the vizier, right? So all of those in power should be engaged in good speech. It will profit those who hear good speech, right? It will profit you. And it will be a loss to those who ignore good speech. So looking at the first wisdom teaching, Ptahhotep argues that good speech is more hidden than greenstones, emeralds, yet may be found amongst the maids at the grindstones. Good speech, Metu Nefer, is more hidden, harder to locate than emeralds. Yet, it may be found among the maids and at the grindstones, okay? So he tells you where to find good speech, even though it's hard to find. But if you listen to what I read prior to that, who he instructs on who should have good speech is all the people in power, right? So the people in power must receive my instructions on how to conduct good speech, but you can find good speech among the maids. Why is it that you believe, or why is it do you think you could find the good speech, you could find the metu nefer again amongst the maids and the servants. Why do you think that is? Why is it that the maids are the ones who already possess good speech?
I'm not too sure about my answer, but just to throw out something,
Yeah.
maybe because the servants, I mean, well, like the maids, as they're named, but they already devote in some way themselves to others, I guess.
Mhm.
Like their day-to-day life is to serve others and make sure that everybody else is okay. So maybe that's why their name is good speech.
Okay, I'll take that. Anyone else? Right? Inherently, by the nature of their occupation, they're servants, right? So they're placed in a position to be of service. That makes sense to me. Anyone else?
They lead more humble lives.
Yep, that's it. I think between what Ernesto said and what Amanda said, we can locate our best approximation of an answer, right? One is humility. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to find too many arrogant maids and servants, right? That's kind of oxymoronic, right? Because of the nature of their job is to serve, there's a layer of humility that must come with it, right? This is why those in power must be instructed. I have to teach you how to give good speech because the nature of your occupation will lean you more to be arrogant. Does that make sense? Whereas by the duty of your occupation, as Ernesto points out, is to be of service, right? And to be of service at some level, you have to be humble. And to be humble allows you to produce good speech or the metu nefer more naturally, okay? The second wisdom teaching. If you meet a disputant in the heat of action, one is more powerful than you, simply fold your arms and bend your back. To confront him will not make him agree with you. Pay no attention to his evil speech. If you do not confront him while he is raging, people will call him ignoramus. Your self-control will be the match for his evil utterances. So now we have the antithesis of good speech, right? Evil speech. But if this person who is delivering evil speech has more power than you, right? Which you may think of as your boss, right? It makes no sense to argue back with them. Fold your hands, bend your back, and let him continue on with his evil speech. Those who are observing this will notice that the one in power who's giving the evil speech, he's the problem, not you, right? So this is the action to take to ensure that strife is eliminated, especially when you're dealing with someone who is an authority over you. So that's what you do with someone who's an authority of you, but someone who is your equal, right? If you meet a dispute in action, one who is your equal, one who is on your level, you will overcome him by being silent while he is speaking evilly. There will be much talk among those who hear, and your name will be held in high regard among the great. So again, even if he's your equal, don't say shit. Just be quiet. Let him prove his ignorance by the evil utterances that he makes. Just sit there and be quiet. Those around you will see, and your name will be held in high regard. Finally, if you meet a disputant in action who is a poor man and who is not your equal, do not attack him because he is weak. Leave him alone. He will confound himself. Do not answer him just so that you can relieve your own heart. Do not vent yourself against your opponent. Wretched is the man who injures a poor man. If you ignore him, listeners will wish to you. If you ignore him, listeners will wish to do what you want. You will beat him through your reproof. So even if somebody is less than you, so to speak, right? even if someone is not your equal. Still, don't argue that person. Remain quiet, right? So if you're in any type of dispute, what is the teaching of Ptahhotep telling you to do? How do you maintain?
Stay quiet.
Be quiet. Shut the fuck up, right? Just don't say shit. You're arguing, just shut the fuck up, right? Period. That's the best way to eliminate strife, according to Ptahhotep. And what that requires is a pristine amount of humility. Because what happens is your ego and your arrogance wants you to refrain. It wants you to respond. It wants you to prove that I'm right. That's your ego talking, right? And what that's going to do is create strife. So if you want to have a society that's harmonious, remain humble and shut the fuck up. That's where the power lies, right? As someone mentioned, right? 5 is a really good one. It says, if you're a man who leads, a man who controls the affairs of many, then seek the most perfect way of performing your responsibility so that your conduct will be blameless. Great is ma'at, right? And we know what ma'at is. And they gave you the parentheses, truth, justice, and righteousness. It is everlasting. Ma'at has been unchanged since the time of Asar. And we know that Asar or Osiris, right? Our Father who art in heaven, this is who they're referring to. So he's saying Ma'at has been since the beginning of time, right? To create obstacles to the following of laws is to open a way to a condition of violence. The transgressor of laws is punished, although the greedy person overlooks this. Baseness may obtain riches, yet crime never lands its wares on the shore. In the end, only Ma'at laughs. Man says, Ma'at is my father's ground. And I think on the bottom of 6, it kind of speaks to that. What happens at the beginning is at the end of 5, right? People who scheme do not prevail. God's command is what prevails. Therefore, live in the midst of peace. What God gives comes by itself, right? So there's no need to try to cheat and scheme to get what you want. If it's meant for you, Allah will provide. The ancestors will provide. The Creator will provide. God will provide. To do things in order, to do things just, to do things truthfully, to do things ma'atic, that lasts. When you try to cheat ma'at, it won't last. Let me see. "14, I think, is a good one. If you're among the people, then gain your supporters by building trust. The trusted man is one who does not speak the first thing that comes to mind, and he will become a leader. A man of means has a good name, and his face is benign. People will praise him even without his knowledge. On the other hand, he whose heart obeys his belly asks for contempt of himself in the place of love. His heart is naked, his body is unanointed. The great hatred is a gift of God. The great-hearted is a gift of God. He is ruled by his appetite belongs to the enemy." For me, the first portion of that, it becomes really important, right? You'll gain supporters by building trust, right? And the trusted man is the one who does not speak, the first thing that comes to his mind. I don't know about y'all, but y'all know like the motherfuckers who just talk too much. Like you just talk too much, right? You up to something. That's like automatically my reaction is, let me hold on to my pocket because this motherfucker talking too much, right? It takes a level of control to determine when you want to vocalize. I don't know where I came across this information. It might be this book, The 48 Laws of Power, but it says the strongest person in the room is the one who can remain silent the longest. If you're ever in a negotiation or a debate, the longer you can remain silent, the more power you have within that exchange. And I think this is what Ptahhotep is speaking to. 17. If you are a person who judges, listen carefully to the speech of the one who pleads. Do not stop that person from telling you everything that they had planned to tell you. A person in distress wants to pour out his or her heart, even more than they want their case to be won. If you are one who stops a person who is pleading, that person will say, why does he reject my plea? Of course, not all that one pleads for can be granted, but a good hearing soothes the heart. The means for getting a true and clear explanation is to listen with kindness. So I think this is powerful because one, it kind of centers the act of listening. And I'm thinking about to a lot of the comments that you all said, you all were attentive to the importance or the impetus placed on listening within the text, right? And this speaks back to that, right? So if you're a judge, the least that you could do, right? The least that you could do is allow these individuals to plead their case without interruption, right? And they argue the person who's pleading their case, they're not concerned really about their case being won. They just want to make sure that they're heard, right? And if you're going to be a fair and non-partial judge, the least you could do is hear both sides. In fact, you can't even make a non-biased decision if you haven't heard both sides of the story, right? So this active listening, it allows for justice to be maintained, right? It allows for the component of ma'at, which is justice, to situate itself within the society because everyone has been heard. You can't have justice if you only listen to one side of the story, right? 30 is interesting. If you are great after having been humble, if you have gained your wealth after having been poor, and then go to a town that you know and that knows your former condition, don't put your trust in your newly acquired wealth, which has come to you as a gift of God. If you do, one day, someone there who is poor may very well overtake you. This is interesting. And I think like a lot of rap motherfuckers could listen to this one, right? Like, if you've been poor, right? And then you come up, it may not be a good idea to go back to the hood flashing your jewelry. Somebody gonna take that shit. Very simple law, right? That's street law right there, right? That's the streets talking, right? But it has vast spiritual principles because what it says is God gave you those things, right? And then to take what God has given you and use that to flash on those who are less fortunate, who know that you were in a impoverished state prior to this, right? Not only does it defile them, it defiles the gifts that God gave you. It's not giving the creator the appropriate homage for the blessings that they bestowed upon you. So not only does it place you in a space of danger, right? You're defiling the gifts of God. So I'm gonna stop reading them from here, but what I would like to do is, even in listening to this, right? Even in reading this, man. It's very over masculine in its language and its terminology. But I would like to know your thoughts on how do you feel women are positioned within this text? Are they objected? Are they subjected? What is the role and the status of women according to this text?
I feel like women don't really have a say because it's not really mentioned in the text.
Right.
I feel like women are not like known to the male population in this text.
Okay.
Pretty much it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree as well. I think like when I was taking these notes, I noticed a woman was not mentioned anywhere until like about number 18. And when they were mentioned, it was about like lust for them instead of like them as a person, or like just, like it was more so about being attracted to them rather than what their position is in society. So I think it seemed more like they were objectified in this, rather than seen as having rights, or like just seen as being considered a person.
Okay. Anyone else disagree with that? Eric, do me a favor. Do you have the reading in front of you?
Yeah, I do.
Can you read number 21 for me?
Yes. Okay, so 21 says, when you prosper and establish your home, love your wife with ardor, then fill her belly and clothe her back, caress her, give her ointments to soothe her body, fulfill her wishes for as long as you live. She is a fertile field for her husband. Do not be brutal. Good manners will influence her better than force. Do not contend with her in the courts. Keep her from the need to resort to outside powers. Her eyes, her storm when she gazes. It is by such treatment that she will be compelled to stay in your house.
So you argue that, and I believe Nina also, right? And I've seen Amanda shaking her head in agreement. I know you didn't say nothing, but it looked like you shake your head, right? So you say that this passage objectifies women. It does not provide them agency.
Yeah, well, actually, once I read over 21 again, it does seem, yeah, that's not the case.
Okay. Kevin?
Like it shows like, oh, you should be taking care of your wife, you should be taking care of women because women are like the life givers, as they're like obviously birth us. Um, it's like as like time moves on, you can see like how like white people they like diminish women and like how like rights were taken away from them when in reality they've had all the same rights as everyone. Like everyone was equal until like some big white guy was like, no.
Yeah. I think Kevin's spot on. And I would argue that this passage puts women on a pedestal. I would argue that this passage gives more power and authority to women than it does men, right? When you prosper and establish your home. So finally, when you get some money and you're able to kind of like buy yourself a home, right? Love your wife with adore, like adore her, right? Adore your wife. Then fill her belly and clothe her back. Caress her, give her ornaments to soothe her body. Fulfill her wishes for as long as you live. She's a fertile field for her husband. Now, this is literal and metaphorical, right? She'll give you children, okay? But like, let's take the historical context into consideration. This is the oldest book in the world, right? So in these times, farming was of very high importance. Even now, in certain places in Africa, farming is of very high importance. And if your field is fertile, right, you have the ability to amass wealth. So what he's saying, what Ptahhotep is arguing is, your wife is that access to wealth. I have 2 kids. Every time my child was born, my money doubled. No bullshit. My first kid, money doubled. Second child, money doubled, right? Fertile field. My wife is from Eritrea. They have a saying that when babies come, they come with bread. Fertile field, right? Fulfill her wishes, not your wishes. It's not for her to fulfill your wishes. You fulfill her wishes for as long as you live, right? Good manners will influence her better than force. Keep her from the need to resort to outside forces. Go ahead, Kevin.
It's kind of like saying, oh, don't abuse your wife and anything like that because you don't want like to be a bad person and you don't want her to resort to getting help from other people.
Or
so just,
breaking out on your ass and finding somebody else.
Yeah.
Outside forces, right? Absolutely. Her eyes is her storm when she gazes. My wife. When shit bad, I see it in here. I know I fucked up. I know a storm is coming when she starts to get that gaze. My kids know a storm is coming when she starts to get that gaze. So we got to get our shit together, right? Like the house better be clean before moms get home so she ain't fucking shit up, right? We don't want that storm, right? It is by such treatment that she will be compelled to stay in your house. So what that's telling you is she has the option to leave your ass if you fucking up. So these are the steps that you must take to ensure that she is willing to stay within your home. So again, I ask you, who has agency? Who is being objectified within this text? It's not the woman. Women have all the agency if we read this closely. I think what's happening is because we live in a patriarchal society that does not value and place the proper emphasis on women, we have been trained to view things through a lens that does not place women on the proper pedestal. This is why on the slide where I have all the African women on there, I have that image of a set in front of the temple to show y'all that in this society, there was no separation between man and women. When women rule, they rule with the same authority, with the same might, with the same militaristic capacity, right? So we can't do an ineffective job of having a close read. We can't bring our own Western 2023 baggage into the read, right? We have to read it for what's there. We have a few minutes left. What I would like to do is open up the floor for a fishbowl. Again, don't make it harder than it has to be, right? I just gave a lecture about the material. Anything that stood out from the lecture, we could you could use that. You could use your journal, right? You could just read from your journal. That's appropriate fishbowl. Or you could even talk about what was discussed in your breakout groups. That's as appropriate fishbowl as well. I'll ask for volunteers. If there's no volunteers, I'll call people at random. You have 1 time per semester to pass. We'll get 3 people at most. Is anyone want to volunteer to fishbowl?
And it could be about anything, right?
Yep, it could be about anything.
Can I start off then, I guess?
Yeah, let me get 2 more people, Ernesto, and then you'll start us off. Anyone else want to volunteer? If not, I'll start calling on folks.
I'll volunteer.
Okay, we got Abigail, and then someone else said something. Kevin, okay, cool.
It was me.
Gotcha. Abigail and Kevin. Ernesto, go ahead and start us off.
Just start off. I just want to talk about the last thing we talked about because it's still on my mind. I enjoy the fact that we were able to talk about the balance that we were able to have, not just as, who gets what and who gets control, but more of like there's a balance between the female and also the male. Because I know in some homes, like some family that I have around the world, they've told me that their neighbors or their other households aren't the same. Like someone has more control and someone isn't. So I find the enjoyment that we can finally see a balance at some point in time between the genders and not just as, oh, it's a basic war between each other, who gets control.
That's a really good call out, Ernesto. This notion of balance. Also, it makes me think about Ma'at, right? Truth, justice, harmony, balance. This is why she also represents the scales, right? Because you want things to be in balance. Abigail?
Feathers? The scale, the feather in the heart?
It's the feather in the heart, they're placed on scales. So yes, you're correct about the feather, but also one of her symbols is the scale. So again, you think about Libra, right? The astrological sign Libra is a scale that stems from Ma'at. Absolutely. For sake of time, we'll move on to Abigail.
I would like to talk about the reading that we read throughout the past few days. I find it really amazing how since the beginning, they have learned to respect each other and to equally put a balance between each other. I'm surprised that we are moving backwards right now as of 2023, and it's really sad to know that we could have had this since like the beginning, but it was disregarded. My favorite line was line 25. It talks about power and knowledge and how respect can be gained through knowledge and speech. And we know a lot of politicians who just don't use their power and their knowledge to spread awareness of the amount of equality we can have right now.
Good call out. Yeah, we've come a long way, regressed a long way backwards from where we could have been. Kevin?
I really like the idea of how they respect morals rather than like rules and whatnot. And my favorite line was number one, which is like what I think is like kind of like the most like important, which was do not be proud and arrogant with your knowledge, which is kind of like saying don't be like an asshole about it. Like you want to be like wise, you want to be like a knowledge source instead of like being like I know this because I know it and you don't.
And I think to piggyback on that, Kevin, like to not be proud with your knowledge, it makes you more willing to share it, right? Because often people who are proud with their knowledge, they want to accumulate knowledge so they could be like the smartest person in the room. But that's really not the point of knowledge. The point of knowledge is it for to be disseminated, right? It's for the collective uplift. So I think that's a really good call out. We have a few more minutes left. Any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts about the reading? I would like to hear from y'all.
I also wanted to add the wisdom teaching number 15. I think it really goes along with what you guys just mentioned. It talks about how we're commissioned to report what should be reported, which is basically saying that we should share like any knowledge that we have, and we should just voice ourselves. And then I also wanted to relate that to what you've been saying in the first few meetings about how we should take up space. I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, good call out. And I think also within 15, right, is like which information that you receive, if you're going to report it accurately, right? Like don't put extras on that shit. If he just said 1, 2, then just say 1, 2. Don't say 1, 2, 3. That's not what was the information you was told, right? So be accurate with your information. Let's not put dubs and extras on shit. Just call it what it is, right? Good call out. Who else?
Can I go?
Yeah.
I feel like the reading we did today kind of reflects on the society where like men hold authority, but like women have more of domestic roles.
Okay.
And like it doesn't really like I don't know how to explain, but like it says like how everyone should have good behavior and like respect towards each other. And like it doesn't really talk about like gender roles at all.
Okay. So here's where I'm a little bit confused and help me understand, Anthony. You're saying it does not speak of gender roles, which I agree with. But then also earlier you said women have more of a domesticated role, right?
Yeah.
So to me, those are like almost contradicting statements because if there is no gender roles, then women can't have a domesticated role, right? They would be able to do whatever is what they desire to do because there's no gender roles at that point, right? I didn't see anything about the domestication of women within the reading. Do you have like a specific passage where they talk about like women being domesticated?
I feel like you talked about how she is fertile, a fertile field, and her husband like will fill her up, will fulfill her wishes.
Uh-huh. But
And
doesn't necessarily mean like she has to be in the kitchen or you know what I mean, in the household. It's just saying that she is a source of wealth and abundance, right? If you think about what a fertile field does is it gives you more crops, right? In an agrarian society, in a society that's built around agriculture and produce, right? The more crops that you have, the more wealth that you have. So it's not really about her role being in the field or being in the house. It's a metaphor for saying how they could bring you wealth and how, they bring you children, which bring you wealth, right? And yeah, that's something that to me, it places great honor and emphasis on women. What I would like to read is my favorite passage, and we'll end there unless someone has some final questions or comments. It's passage 11. And I think to me, this is, if you take nothing else from this book or from this class, this passage here is something to walk away with. Follow your heart for as long as you live. Do no more than is required. Do not shorten the time of follow the heart, since that offends the Ka, And remember, we know that ka, K-A means soul. Don't waste time on daily cares over and beyond providing for your household. When wealth finally comes, then follow your heart. Wealth does no good if you're gloom. I'm gonna read it one more time. Follow your heart for as long as you live. Do no more than is required. Do not shorten the time of follow the heart, since that offends the ka, the soul. Don't waste time on daily cares over and beyond providing for your household. When wealth finally comes, then follow your heart. Wealth does no good if you're gloom. So in other words, right? Do what you're on your heart to do. Do what your spirit is inspired to do. Don't shorten that time. Your time on this earth should be about following your heart, living your purpose, fulfilling your desire. If you shorten that time, you're offending your soul. The only daily pursuits that you should be worried about outside of following your heart is making sure that your household is taken care of. Once the needs of your household is met, then you must go back to following your heart. And it tells you, when wealth finally comes, the wealth will come. They're not negating that. They're not saying that you won't get the wealth. It will come. But when you get it, what should you do? Follow your heart. Because you can't do nothing with wealth if you sad, if you're depressed. Think about this. How many wealthy people do you know that committed suicide? Right? How many people who lived a life full of purpose and lived their life to follow their heart do that act? Very rare. So it's very simple. If you want to eliminate strife in your life, strife in society, follow your heart. And if you're unsure what your heart is saying, you need to listen to your spirit. This is why we meditate. If you're unsure what your heart is telling you, think about your skills, your talents, your abilities, and your gifts. They have been gifted to you by the ancestors. They have been gifted to you by the Creator, by the Most High, to allow you to recognize what your purpose on this planet is. Every 22 individuals on this Zoom call has a purpose, a divine appointment, right? An appointment that has been set by God. And you have been placed on this planet to understand what your purpose is and then live and fulfill that purpose, to follow your heart. Don't shorten that time. Don't waste time on anything other than taking care of your household. Then follow your heart. Live your purpose. Find your purpose. Pursue your purpose. Then the wealth will come. It'll come. But again, follow your heart. It's very simple. Where we have been confused in this society is to follow what? The bag. Go get that bag, then you'll be happy. Go get that car, and you'll be happy. You get that chain, you're gonna feel good about yourself. And it's very, very, very sinister for women. Because now they have told you that your value is based on how you can sexualize yourself. Correct me if I'm wrong. It has nothing to do with your purpose. But how can you sexualize yourself? And for men, it's how can you make yourself a material entity? How can you show your wealth? That's where value has been placed on the sexes in this society. Nothing about purpose, nothing about your heart, nothing about your soul. This is why we are a society in perpetual, constant, eternal strife. Our values are fucked. No one even knows how to begin the process of following their heart or what their heart wants them to do. You know, to get a job, you know, to get a check, you know, to scheme and connive to get a bag. This is where we're at. Last comments. Give me two and we'll call it out. 2 comments and we'll close. Go ahead, Ernesto.
I just wanted to say, sorry,
Go ahead, JD.
but I excuse me. I just wanted to say that I believe in like what you're saying. I believe that like people nowadays don't really have like a purpose of like what they really want. What the world kind of just has is just like, you know, like to get like the bag or like get some money, like to keep on going to the next thing, or even find like the next girl or have multiple girls. Like that just feels like that's just one of those things that people like value nowadays, and they don't really see inside themselves as what they value like to themselves or to the world or to their family. So they kind of just chase this one thing, like constant, like chase. And then they don't ever see like sometimes you just kind of gotta just like stand where you're at and understand like why you're here and just like attract everything that you want in your life to just go to you instead of just trying to chase one thing as it's, you know, chaos and everything else. I just think that you should just let everything that you want in your life and you value, whether that's like anything in life, that you should just really like reflect and then just attract it to your own like essence and presence, basically.
Thank you, JD. Ernesto, you had your hand up, and then Kevin.
I just want to add on how you were mentioning the following your heart and not just the bag, like you said. I've seen a lot of friends that just didn't even want to try in life, and they just went straight for a paycheck or just money. And the way I see it is, and this may be selfish for bringing in my ideals, but the way I see it is like, if even the things you want in life are so high point where no one believes, maybe it should be worth trying. Like maybe it should actually be worth trying until you actually get to that point. Because not that many people out there actually will try or take the first step to trying, and they just give up on the first day.
And everyone's purpose is different, right? Kevin?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's like you see it on like the TVs, you see it in movies where they like kind of like advertise some sort of like made up like life for you, when in reality you can just follow your own life, but people are just still like they're blind to what their dreams want, and they just want to focus on one like pinpoint, the millionaire dream. You want to be a politician, or you want to be like a lawyer, like not that those jobs are bad, but it's kind of like they just feel like locked onto them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so for next week, and I know we're getting close on time, so I'm trying to hurry up. Next week we'll be dealing with ma'at, and I'm going to warn you, this is a little bit more difficult to digest than the previous reading, but you'll see here week 3, Karenga Ma'at parts 1, 2, and 3. Again, think of this as one reading. What we'll probably do is cover parts 1 and parts of part 2 on Monday, and then close out with part 2 and part 3 on Wednesday. So definitely for Monday, have part 1 read, and then you know, if you can, get through part 2. If not, we'll continue that on Wednesday. Are there any final questions, comments, or